the tricky thing that happens is that everything falls onto the default caregiver. And so they know everything. And so then there's this double-edged sword of like this gatekeeping phenomenon that happens, right? It's like, oh, well, they just know everything, so it's easier if they do it. This is a way for people to have all the information in one space so that everyone who says they want to help can actually have access to the information without it being another step for the default caregiver to participate in.
Hi, I'm Amory Kibler, and this is The Space Between. I'm a cancer survivor and a mom. And while those roles don't define me, they have shaped who I am. I created this space to share honest stories, expert insights, and meaningful support for families navigating life with cancer. If you're balancing treatment, caregiving, parenting, or just trying to hold it all together, you are not alone. This is your space to connect, to heal, and to feel seen, and I'm so glad that you're here. Today's guest is someone who truly gets the weight of caregiving and the beauty inside it too. Ashley Blackington is a board-certified occupational therapist, the mom of four, and the founder of Dovetail, a care tech platform reimagining how we support patients and families through complex health journeys. She's also the host of the And Both podcast, where she creates space for the emotional truths of caregiving that often go unspoken. Let's get started. Ashley, I'm so excited that you're here today. Before we kind of dive into everything, can you set the stage, share a little bit about your background just to get started?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm really excited to be here and to chat with you because it's always lovely. Yeah, so my background is I am an occupational therapist by training. I have worked in the industry for 15 years now, I would say. And my background was in acute care, acute rehab, working in that kind of older adult space. I shied away from pediatrics. I have all the kids at home. That's where I do the kid things. But yeah, so my experience clinically was pretty varied. I've worked with brain injury, stroke, amputee, cancer, all of those kind of big heavy hitter categories. And throughout that experience, learned that, or saw over and over again, the impact of caregiving on these family caregivers and the lack of support and tools that are available for them. And so through a series of long, windy career paths, I ended up founding a tech company where we are building a platform for caregivers to be able to communicate, collaborate, and create these family care networks that they need in order to support them in their journey as caregivers.
Amazing. Okay, but let's start with your role as an occupational therapist, because maybe people don't know exactly what that means. And it's definitely an underappreciated role, and it's super critical. You're focusing on improving the quality of life for patients, recovery, long-term physical and emotional impact. What are some of the things that occupational therapy may include for someone who's recovering from cancer?
Sure. Yeah. I always think of occupational therapy or describe it as we're kind of like the grout. Everyone else has these really great defined roles and titles. When a PT walks into the room, you know what they're doing in speech and nursing and all of that. And OT, we're in a little bit of everyone's business, but really trying to figure out how to connect these things, right? So the role of OT is everything from the ADL, so getting washed and dressed and grooming and all of that, to functionally moving around in your space, whether that's the hospital room to start with or going home, rehab, things like that, activity modifications. If you've had a cancer surgery that involves a resection of some type, or you're going to have new limitations, the problem solving that happens around that is oftentimes done with an occupational therapist. So we are a little bit of the Swiss Army knife of medicine, where we come in and say, okay, if everything changes right now, how do we look at how you're doing and what you need to do, and most importantly, what you want to be able to do, and how do we either help learn, teach new skills, work on adaptations for people, or modify the activity or the environment around you so that you can successfully complete that. And that goes across the board. We are a little bit in everything, but it all comes from a place of trying to make sure that at the end of working with an OT, someone who's saying, I didn't think I'd be able to do this again, has a way to do that in a way that is checking that box for them, filling their bucket, making them feel satisfied and competent in that skill, whatever it may be.
Okay, I want to ask you about a couple of common cancer treatment symptoms that I know come up a lot and can make it really difficult to parent. Fatigue. What are some helpful things that you might suggest to someone who is challenged by fatigue?
Yeah, I think fatigue is huge. It's one of those things where, if you can't get off the starting line, how are you supposed to get through all the things? One of the big pieces there is really getting into prioritization of things that need to get done. So I think that when we go throughout our day, when everything is sort of ticking right along, we don't think about adding more things to our plate, right? It's like, oh, I'll just figure out how to put that in there. But if you are someone who is going through chemo and you are dealing with fatigue, you've hit a ceiling. And so it's taking inventory of how many things can I actually get done today? What does the energy output look like that I'm going to be doing that? And having that be the lens with which you look at your to-do list or your schedule or whatever to say, okay, some things just have to fall off and some things have to be delegated if possible to delegate them and to really work within the limits that you have for that day.
Definitely. I feel like when I started making my list to manage fatigue, I was terribly unrealistic. And at the end of every day, there were like 5 things that I couldn't get to. So being able to let things kind of fall to the side or little piles of things build up around the house and all of that can be a huge challenge, but you have to focus on what your priorities are and doing those things first.
Yeah, and giving yourself the grace of knowing that this is not a forever situation, right? It's a new symptom or it's a new complication of this already very complicated journey, and that it's not meant to be a forever piece, that while you're going through treatment, while you're going through the healing process post-operatively, that you are going to be in a different state than you typically are. And so giving yourself permission to say, okay, right now I cannot run at 100. Right now I can run at 40, and that's great, because if I'm at 40 right now, I'm actually running at 100 for myself.
Yeah, actually the phrase right now sort of became my mantra throughout healing, just to be able to focus on where I was at that moment, saying, well, right now I can do this, and I'm just going to focus on the right now. And then, there's going to be another season of my life where I'll be able to do other things, but this is where I am right now.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
What about cognitive support? Chemo brain is a real thing. It can be really hard also. It amplifies the fatigue and the sense of overwhelm that many cancer patients feel.
Yeah, I think that's when you can really pull in some tools, and it doesn't have to be, you've got to set up this new home operating system or you've got to spend a ton of money to onboard a bunch of things. I think that it can be really simple. I think you can do a lot pen and paper wise. I think you can do a lot to make sure that you are tracking things. Like if you're normally a person that's able to sort of juggle 6 or 7 different ongoing projects in your head at one time, it's to not continue to make that demand on yourself. It's to get that stuff out on paper. It's the idea of, the ticker tape that runs in your head, right? It's all these projects that you're doing, all of these reminders, everything. And what you really have to do is dump that all out. And you've got to dump it out onto paper. Because I think that one of the things that happens often is when you're running at that capacity or, the pile is just getting too big, people start making lists and then they make lists of the same lists. And so it's having a dedicated space where this is what I'm going to work from, whether it is a sheet of paper, whether it's a poster board, whether it's, something on the fridge, but coming up with a routine, something that is intuitive for you. Like I'm the person that has the calendar hanging on the wall in my kitchen because I'm in the kitchen and out of the kitchen 100 times a day. So that's just where I can stop and check out whatever is coming up, because I still forget, what I'm supposed to be doing in the afternoon because I have 4 kids and, it's a thing. It's a whole thing. But I think that if you're facing sort of this chemo brain cognitive overwhelm right now, is to get everything out in front of you instead of trying to continue to rattle it around, because that's going to add a complication that you don't need, which is just feeling like everything is all falling apart and not being able to keep track of it.
And what are your thoughts on having that place be in your phone? Is that okay?
Yeah, I think whatever place works. I think that the screen time situation is probably not a conversation that needs to come into this, because think about it. If you're someone who is in and out of the hospital and you are going around to doctor's appointments and you are at home and you are still, doing things like school pickup of some variety or whatever you have going on, you always have your phone with you. So if you always have your phone with you and you pull it out and you've got something on there that can help you organize all those things, that's where it makes sense. And it has to make sense for you. And I think that sometimes when we get into these situations, people say, oh, well, I should be doing this and I don't want to spend all this time on my phone and I don't want to do that. You just got to right now work with what you got and what's easiest.
Okay, let's talk about doctor visits. Doctor visits are short and intense. Like, I feel like sometimes we only have 20 minutes. What are your top strategies to help patients and caregivers make the most of their time without feeling overwhelmed or like they've forgotten some of the things that they wanted to ask?
Yeah, I think that that's a really common concern is that, you get into the doctor's office. And I used to say this all the time when I was working with people. Like they always say at the end of the visit, do you have any questions? But you've just talked for 20 minutes and they're still processing everything that you just said. And they're like, nope, I don't have any questions. And because I was in the hospital, I'd be able to circle back around. But inevitably, at least twice a day, I'd have a patient that I was just walking by their room and they'd say, oh, hey, I have a question. That's going to come up. And I think one of the ways that people can prepare for that is keeping a running list of questions. Like if you have questions for your oncologist, if you have questions for your GP, if you have questions for your surgeon, whoever you're going to see in the time leading up to that appointment, is try to make a list of those, because that allows you to make the most of the appointment time that you have, that face-to-face time, because it's not easy to get somebody on the phone when you are not sitting in the office. I think also, depending on how your appointments are stacked, depending on, if you have a bunch in one day or you have them spread out throughout the week, is that asking questions about how things interact is a really important place to do that. If you can prepare for that appointment by saying, okay, my oncologist says one thing, my GP says another, the surgeon wants to do this. It's that coming in that really prepared kind of way. And that doesn't necessarily mean you've got to go and like research all of the terms. And I think that sometimes when people talk about medication and they talk about treatment and stuff like that, because that's the language they speak, they do a really good job of speaking that language, but not necessarily remembering that the person that they're speaking that to is probably not native in medical terminology or native in prescription or native in drug interactions and things like that. So always, always, always using that time to say, I don't understand what this is, and not being nervous or afraid or concerned that that's going to in any way impact the visit, because that's the time. It's how are these things all going to line up with each other, and what do I need to know to prepare for the next thing?
Okay, care often becomes a group effort. What advice do you have for families and friends looking to divide roles, avoid miscommunication, and collaborate instead of getting overwhelmed?
Yeah, I think a really important thing for family caregivers to know is what their capacity is. I think a lot of times when people go into these situations of caregiving, they say, I want to help. Just tell me what to do. I want to help. And the tendency is to say yes to everything. And then it becomes really overwhelming. Something like a cancer journey, it's a long journey. It is a lot of appointments. It is a lot of follow-up. It is a lot of recovery time. And it's a lot of big things like potentially a surgery, or small things like fatigue that goes on and on and on for months as you're working your way through it. I think that having an open and honest conversation in the beginning of this journey, hey, my sister can help with this, but she's not comfortable here. Hey, my, so-and-so can help with this, but they're not comfortable here, or they don't have the time, or figuring out what people's capacity are, and then build the team from there, versus saying, I have these 3 people or this one person or 6 people, and then we just dish out the jobs. Is that if it's specific to the person and what they're able to do, that's going to create a much more long-term successful strategy.
And is this something that Dovetail can help with?
Absolutely. I saw this all the time. It's that, especially when you have a default caregiver, the person that everything rolls down into their lap is someone that's like, I guess I'll just take it on. It's so much easier if it all just falls to one. It's the idea, right? Like you take them to the doctor, so you're the one who knows. So you. And there has to be a way for that person to outsource some help, whether it is a paid endeavor. But for me, what I saw over and over again was families that were pulling this together. And we know this to be true. in the US, family caregivers are the backbone of the long-term care system for everybody across the board, not just cancer patients and people that are impacted by it. So with the Dovetail, the idea is that you are able to create it from a democratized space. It's not that default caregiver that assigns tasks. It is a working platform where you can say, these are the things that need to get done, and it updates in real time. So people that are a part of your care network can say, I will take that on, and they have all the information there. And I think that when you move away from a default caregiver status, that person, the tricky thing that happens is that everything falls onto the default caregiver. And so they know everything. And so then there's this double-edged sword of like this gatekeeping phenomenon that happens, right? It's like, oh, well, they just know everything, so it's easier if they do it. This is a way for people to have all the information in one space so that everyone who says they want to help can actually have access to the information without it being another step for the default caregiver to participate in.
I teamed up with Stacey Eagle and Elise Ryan to create Sea Waves of Support, healing selenite bracelet sets. You keep one and gift the other to someone facing cancer or life's challenges, a powerful reminder they're not alone. Learn more at seawavesofsupport.com. Many of our listeners are caring for either a partner or an aging parent or even a kid. This can be extremely emotional. What kind of advice would you offer them to support themselves through this?
In my experience, the tendency has been for people to go, wholeheartedly into it as fast as possible and as hard as possible, right? It's when you hear that diagnosis and, it's the person that you have been married to for 10 years or your child or your parent. There's so much emotion and caring and concern and love in that you start pouring out of your own bucket pretty quickly. And I think that my advice, if you are someone who is beginning this journey, is to circle the wagons as quickly as possible. You do not have to be a one-person rodeo if you don't have to be. If there are people that are able to help with things that are not necessarily related to the treatment process, but there are people that can help with all of the other things that are going on around you, enlist them ASAP. Don't wait, because by the time you realize you're burnt out, you are literally a pile of ashes because you're done. It is to speak to people as well. We are humans and we do best in community and creating spaces and sharing experiences with other people. So whether that means finding a support group, finding a community of other people that are going through the same thing, whether it means therapy, whatever it is, that the double isolation of being the caregiver and being the person that is in lockstep with this person going through the process it takes a huge toll on the caregiver. So making sure that you're taking care of yourself, because if you take care of yourself, you are in a better position to help take care of that other person, and start early, get as much help as you possibly can. And that might just be little things, but don't sort of like close it all in, because it makes it so much harder down the road.
And what about small routines or daily practices that caregivers and patients could incorporate into their routine to have mindset shifts or to help them to stay grounded?
Yeah, I think that there's a really interesting dynamic that happens when you move into the caregiving space, is that because it's almost like a project management kind of piece. And I think this is why a lot of people that are going through something like this, it's such a massive undertaking in your life, that they traditionally, or they in the last few years have turned to like a project management software piece, because that's what it feels like, right? You've got to manage appointments and you've got to manage medication and all of that stuff. But what happens when you do that is that the person that you love and care about becomes a project. And I think that creates an opportunity for disconnection, where it just becomes about the medical journey that you're on together. So I think trying to make as many opportunities as possible to like close the medical piece and remember to connect with each other in whatever way that means, if that means like getting a chance to go outside and hang out together, whether that means like closing down all of the health records and all of the appointments and all of the logistics and things like that, to just really try and connect with each other is really important. If you are a caregiver that has a practice, like a meditation practice, a meeting with friends practice, a get up in the morning and journal, or, stay up late at night. I am not a 5 a.m. journal, hot water and lemon person. That is not me. I am a late at night possum. More kind of person. So every time someone's like, you need to get up and you need to do this, this, and this, I'm like, that doesn't work for me. So knowing what's going to work best for you and what makes sense for you, and also what allows you to maintain as much of the emotional connection and the relationship as possible outside of caregiving, I think is really important to keep top of mind.
Yeah, and you brought up a really great point about the importance of connection in healing, because I do feel like there's so much value in that, in surrounding yourself with the people who are caring for you, and also other friends and family and people who are going to bring in love and joy and support, and being able to have fun in a way, like not letting your cancer diagnosis consume every moment of your life. Like for caregivers, if you can also add in fun things that you do together, being able to be silly together sometimes, and doing those things that make it feel more like a normal part of your routine, helps the cancer patient to feel like they're thriving and not just sort of surviving and like holding on until they get through their treatment. Because as you said, sometimes the treatment can go on for years, and you can't just hold on for that long. You have to find a way to be able to live your life and enjoy your life and feel really connected to the people that are around you, be able to go out to dinner or on walks, or, whatever it is that is bringing you joy.
I think too, like from the OT perspective, we talk about engagement in occupation. This is what people say all the time, right? I'm the occupational therapist, and they say, well, I either don't need a job or I've retired or whatever. And I say, we're talking about the occupation of living. And so there is so much more to life than the basics, although the basics are such an important part of life. And so exactly to your point, like you've got to find a way to do the things that light you up, especially if you're going through something like this together. And as a caregiver, to remember to connect with the things that help you feel whole and that help you feel balanced. And part of that, if this is a relationship with someone that you are the caregiver for, is remembering that connection that the two of you have, because that's like to what you were saying earlier, that's the right now piece of this, right? Like right now, we cannot go on a trip to someplace warm in the winter because we're here and we have all of this going on. What can we do that doesn't necessarily equate, but it equates in the way that we are able to engage with that right now? And it's trying to make those modifications along the way in that right now sense, knowing that the goal is to eventually get back to the things that you were doing before, but trying to keep that boat floating as well.
Definitely. Yeah. And I used the what now theory when I was like, okay, right now I can only eat chicken and rice, but what are some other things that I'm enjoying myself right now? Like I can get out and take a walk with my kids. I can be out in nature. I can watch a fun movie, all of those things. So it's like keeping in mind, what are the things that you can do, and appreciating them, even if they're small things in the moment, because small things really can make a huge impact. And the thing that you remember can be a joke that you are sharing with your partner or your kids. So the small things can be the big things.
Especially when you have so many big things going on at once. This is not a little thing, it's a huge thing. So how can you get like those flickers of joy in there that make everything sort of light up a little bit?
And is there any last thoughts or advice that you want to share with our listeners?
I think that from an OT perspective is to do what you can to take care of yourself. I know that sounds like, oh, great advice, but really to make sure that you are not losing yourself in the process as a caregiver, and to make sure that you are not losing yourself in the process as someone who is going through treatment in that process. And that is to, like we were just talking about, is to remember the things that light you up, to remember the things that you enjoy, to remember the parts of your life that do make you feel like you're thriving, that do make you feel like, tomorrow is the day that I want to get to, because it's not all doom and gloom and appointments and feeling terrible and discovering the things that I can't do right now or I can no longer do. And it is to try and give yourself a lot of grace and space and stay as involved as possible in whatever capacity that you can in the things that do light you up and bring you joy.
And where can our listeners find you and Dovetail?
Yeah, so you can find me. I'm the most active on LinkedIn, just Ashley Blackington there. You can see all the info about Dovetail at dovetaildesigns.co. Our platform is launching. I'm not sure when this episode releases, but our platform is launching in June, and we are itching to get it out the door and itching to hear from caregivers, because as the project moves on and the product moves on, we want it to evolve in that way. And so I would love to connect with anyone on LinkedIn who has questions about caregiving, OT, anything like that. I'm the most active there. You can also find us on Instagram at mydovetail.app. And I'm happy to speak to anyone at any point in time about whether it's a caregiving journey question or an OT question.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for joining me on this episode of The Space Between. If this show brought you comfort or a sense of community, I'd love for you to subscribe and share it with anyone who might need it too. You can join the conversation on Instagram at thespacebetween_cancer.family and head to amoryKibler.com for more resources designed to support parents navigating cancer. Just remember, you're never alone. This podcast is here as a companion on your journey towards healing, growth, and connection.